Welcome to Coffee with Democrats, a sensible platform for progressive conversations. Coffee with Democrats is a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democrats, candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds who want great conversations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increase Democrat voter registration and Democrat voter turnout by making voting more exciting and meaningful. And now here's your host of Coffee with Democrats, Kevin Dawson.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, everybody. This is Kevin Dawson, co-hosting with Scott Hamilton on Coffee with Democrats. We are joined today with a special friend, somebody that has been on Coffee with Democrats before, and we're excited to have him on with Coffee with Democrats today, and that's Dennis Baker. So with everybody going to join on here, we do have a little bit of an issue going on with my camera system. For some reason, it's giving us a little glitch, so bear with us on that. We're going to work through that and just continue on. If for some reason I drop off, then Scott's going to take over. But thank you, everybody, for joining us with Coffee with Democrats. We do have a little bit of housekeeping that we need to talk about here. Number one, please share this video with all of your friends and all of the followers that you have on all of your social media networks. It's very important to get this message out to as many people as we can to let people know about Dennis Baker and the great candidacy that he's running over in Eastern Oklahoma against Republican Kevin Hern. So in order to understand where we are with Coffee with Democrats, we are going to be on, this is on Twitter Live, on Facebook Live, and on YouTube Live. So let me go through those so that you can find us and your friends can find us. On Twitter Live, it's at Coffee with Dems. That's just DEMS. Twitter cheated us out of the last several letters, so they only let us go with @ Coffee with Dems. On Facebook Live, just go look us up, Coffee with Democrats. There's a big, long Facebook thing that we got to put in there, but if you just look up Coffee with Democrats, we're the only ones out there that I know of on Facebook. And then on YouTube Live, go to @Coffee with Democrats 7998. That's all one word, @ Coffee with Democrats 7998. So again, we are excited to be here with Dennis Baker. And Dennis, you're a busy man, and my goodness, it is so much fun to rejoin with you and be with you. I wish we were in person, but this is the next best thing. So good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Kevin. Thank you so much for the invitation. Good morning, Scott. Glad to be here. Glad to talk about some issues so important to Oklahomans.
Great, great. Well, before we get started too much, I forgot my coffee cup in the other room, but I do have my next best thing here to it. But what's your morning, your morning favorite beverage? When you get up in the morning, you start looking for a little boost of energy. What do you go to first?
Coffee. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll find myself drinking it throughout the day. So I'm trying to cut back a little bit because it's become a habit. It's become a habit.
Right. Well, it's I think it's generational. It's our generation. We grew up on coffee. And but it's also something you as an athlete, you train every single day, you run every single day. And it kind of shocked me when I found out that you drink coffee so much. So, but it shouldn't shock anybody. I guess it is generational, and it shouldn't hurt anything that you're doing as an athlete or impair what you're doing. But it is something most people will go with an energy drink or with just straight water being an athlete.
Yeah. It's interesting because your body gets used to that. And when I was in the FBI and we had to take a firearms course, and then at the end of that course you have to go shoot a certain score,
right?
And the instructors were saying, hey, all you coffee drinkers, make sure that before you go out and shoot this course that you drink your coffee, because if you don't, your hands are going to be shaky and you're not going to be able to score. So your body gets used to that.
Sure.
So my norm is coffee.
Interesting.
So we're gonna ask Dennis to start us off here. So Dennis, if you would please help us begin this conversation with your beginning remarks, something that you would normally do when you're going out on the campaign trail and you meet with other fellow Democrats and you're trying to tell them about your platform. So give us your best prepared candidate speech and why voters should vote for you.
No, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. So I always start out with what it means to take an oath. And the reason I do that is because I have a background in law enforcement, and I took an oath. I took an oath when I was a Tulsa police officer to protect and defend the Constitution with my life if need be. And then I took an oath when the very first day when I was arrived at the FBI Academy. They brought us all in. We arrived throughout the day, and before we were dismissed for that day, they brought us into a room and we raised our hand and swore an oath. And I tell people it's the same oath that a U.S. congressman takes. So I lived that oath for 23 years as an FBI special agent. And it's when I'm sworn into U.S. Congress, it's going to be exactly the same oath to protect and defend the Constitution. And that allows me to talk a little bit about why this election is so important, what has been done to undermine our Constitution, our democracy, and to let people understand what's at stake. So after I talk about that, I talk about my background a lot because I think it's important that we have representation in Congress by an Oklahoman who has Oklahoma values. And I talk a lot about Oklahoma values that we all share because this campaign to me is about bringing people together. And I bring them together around our shared Oklahoma values. This is not a campaign where I'm pitting Oklahomans against each other or Americans against each other. I'm bringing in people together to work together to move us forward. So I talk a lot about that. And then I talk a little bit about my background growing up in Oklahoma because I grew up in rural Oklahoma. I lived from like the first grade through the sixth grade in a city, went to a city school. I had access to a really good grade school in Okmulgee. I had a library just down the road. I had a little grocery store. We had a playground. We had our church. It was all a community. And then around the seventh grade, I moved out into the country. And so I have the viewpoint of both lives. And then we didn't grow up wealthy. We didn't have connections to important people. I saw my parents struggle to buy propane in the winter, pay the electric bill, and we were like most families living paycheck to paycheck. But my mother always emphasized education, and for someone of our family status, public education is where we got. I am a product of public education, through high school, and so I understood very early that if I want to progress, if I want to have financial security, I needed to have a good education. And my mother emphasized that. And she would never let us miss a day of school. And I was so proud. There were only a few years that I had where I didn't get a perfect attendance certificate. And it was because of her saying, you're not going to miss a day of school, because that's how important it was to her. So I talk about that because education is under attack here in Oklahoma. It's a foundational thing for us to have good public education. We've had Republican control for since 2011. They've had a trifecta. They've controlled every level of government since then. And if they were going to do anything for public education, you would think in 12, 13 years, they would have done something. They're doing nothing. It's one thing to say you support public education. It's another to actually do something about it. So I talk about public education. I talk about healthcare. So these are values that Oklahomans should all share. They do share. Public education, Kevin, is written into our state constitution. It's written into it. That's how important it is to Oklahomans. And they're not going to give it up without a fight. And I'm there to fight for them. So healthcare, one of the things we've seen over the years is how expensive and how complicated it's gotten to the point where people put off, regular checkups, or they may be sick, but they don't go to the doctor because they can't afford it. Or they're uncertain about, hey, what is the bill? I don't understand why I'm billed for this. I thought my insurance covered it. The cost of insurance has increased. And we're among the states that has the highest percentage of uninsured medical insurance folks in the country. We have the lowest funded schools, we have the lowest achievement rates among public schools, and we have the highest rate of uninsured healthcare folks. So that's a concern. And so one thing I'm going to mention, and I want to answer your questions, but you can see I'm talking issues. I'm talking about solving these issues, solving these problems. You will never hear my opponent talking about that. They don't even acknowledge the issue. So I point out a lot about poverty in Oklahoma. We have one of the highest poverty rates in the country. If you're an Oklahoman, that's not an Oklahoman value. That's not something we accept. But you'll never hear Republicans saying we're working to reduce that, to solve that, to see what's causing it. But I am. And I think that's your elected officials. You should be holding their feet to the fire saying, why aren't you? When you see so many homeless on the streets, you should be asking the questions about why is that happening? And when you look further and you see so many of those are veterans, you should be saying, why is that happening? What are you doing to address it? But you'll never hear the Republicans address that. I will. So part of it is telling people who I am, where I come from, what my background is. I spent 23 years in the FBI. I do come from a law enforcement background. When I tell people, they want to know what exactly did you do, and it's simple for the FBI. We uphold the Constitution and we protect the American public. Same thing in Congress. It's the same thing you should be doing in Congress. It's no different. It's no different. The job is no different. But the idea is that you pass meaningful laws that move America forward, that move Oklahoma forward. So I talk about my background. I talk about the state of Oklahoma, where we are, a little bit about how we got here. And I point the finger at Republicans because I can because they're in charge. They're in control. They're running for office. Tell me what you're going to do. You got us into this mess. Tell us how you're going to get it out. I don't hear it. I don't hear any of that. So if you want to point the finger, Oklahoma voters, at anyone right now about why you can't find affordable housing, why your paycheck hasn't increased and kept up with the cost of living, why your unions have been rendered, ineffective, why your public schools are failing, all those institutions, why the high crime rate in Tulsa is higher than in New York City or Los Angeles. Look at your local, state, and federal elected officials, because they're all Republicans. They're all Republicans. And so if living in a red state is so great, why are we in the bottom in every category? And that's the questions I ask. I paint a picture. I tell the picture, because there's only one group involved in that, and that's the Republicans. And then I talk about our vision, a Democratic vision, an Oklahoma Democratic vision for Oklahoma, because I am I'm outlining a new type of Oklahoman that is a Democrat, that is able to actually start out with, number one, work across the aisle and actually work with moderate, reasonable Republicans to solve problems. I'm not someone that thinks that I can go in and change things overnight, but I am someone that is willing to work with moderate conservatives and move the ball forward for America. And there may be things that I can agree with on the other side. Right now, with the MAGA movement, you will never see that. And I can tell you that you will never see that with my opponent, Kevin Hearn, because he's a MAGA Republican, and that's not what they do. They disrupt, and I've called them the enemy within, because they run against government, but they're not running to improve it, they're running to destroy it. So one of my visions for Oklahoma is in the economic, because I think Democrats have to start talking about economic improvement, because that helps all Oklahomans. And my vision is for high-speed rail, passenger rail between Tulsa and Oklahoma City. Right now, there is a bipartisan infrastructure bill that has put money out there, $8 billion for infrastructure improvements. And there's regions around the country that are taking advantage of that. We have talked about this for over 20 years. We've never had the money before. We have it now. We have someone in Congress in CD1, Kevin Hearn, who voted against this, is doing absolutely nothing. He's someone in his Republican Study Committee budget wants to eliminate that funding for high-speed rail. I want it. I want it. It's time for it. We need to develop a regional hub. We have the Tulsa ports here. We have the opportunity to move us forward. We need to build something here and not tear it down. So I'm going to stop, because I could go on for an hour, but I just want to give just a brief outline, because it's more than just I'm against something. I'm also for something. Oklahoma should be for something. We should be for building something better.
Well, that's an outstanding, what you just said. You know, it goes back to what our President Biden says, build back America. You ended your statement with virtually the same kind of statement that our president says. So before we move on and start asking questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott so that he can ask the majority of the questions. But before we do that, I want people to understand who Dennis is. So I'm going to kind of give a little bit of a rundown, and I'm going to save your voice there, Dennis. You're going to be talking a lot with Scott here in just a minute. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a break while I talk about who you are. So let's meet Dennis and understand who he is. Dennis was born in Claremore, Oklahoma. So for those of us who are Oklahoma aficionados, who have studied Oklahoma and know absolutely everything there is to know about Oklahoma, I'm not one of them, but I try to put myself in that camp, even though I'm not. Claremore, Oklahoma is the town in the Rodgers and Hammerstein movie, Oklahoma. So he was born in Oklahoma for sure. So that's my claim to fame, to know that. So, but he grew up in Okmulgee and Sapulpa. He is a Native American. He's part of the Yuchi tribe, and he's also a member of the Muskogee Nation, Muskogee Creek Nation. He was in law enforcement. He is a law enforcement professional and an attorney. Dennis served as a Tulsa police officer and an FBI special agent. In the FBI, he served in the FBI Senior Executive Service as a special agent in charge. Most recently, Dennis provided security oversight at Sandia National Laboratories. And then you can tell by looking at his lifelong journey, he has had a call for public service his entire life. Dennis earned his bachelor's degree in arts and then also his Juris Doctorate from the University of Tulsa. He is a member of the Oklahoma Bar Association. Dennis began his law enforcement career as a Tulsa police officer and then served in the FBI. And his first assignment in the FBI was the Charlotte Division, where where he investigated violent crime and drug matters. And then following 9/11 and the terrorist attacks on our country, he was promoted to supervisory special agent at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., where he oversaw intelligence collection and investigative efforts directed against Al-Qaeda. So for those of you who are listening in here and you think, oh, Kevin Hearn, whatever, Kevin Hearn can't hold a candle to Dennis Baker. Dennis Baker is the real deal. I mean, he has got it from the top down and from the bottom up. He understands our nation and our nation's security better than Kevin Hearn. Kevin Hearn can only dream about that. So Dennis was also promoted to the FBI's Phoenix division, where he supervised the International Terrorism Squad. Again, who do we need in Oklahoma to take care of our terrorists and be able to keep an eye out for terrorism? Do we need somebody who flipped burgers at McDonald's and his claim to fame is grifting and taking $280 million from people and then having that forgiven and then saying, no, we don't want to give any kind of forgiveness to anybody because it's we shouldn't do that. But here again, he took $2.8 million, Kevin Hearn did, and kept it in his own pocket. He was forgiven that money, and yet he doesn't want to allow for anybody else. So it's welfare for the rich and nobody else. Dennis won't do that. And I say that with such conviction because that is not the makeup for who Dennis is. So I'm going to stop there, but I just want to make one more point about his security background. So when you talk about, making sure that we've got a security net around Oklahoma and around our nation, Dennis oversaw the security at Sandia National Laboratories in Livermore, California, whose primary mission including maintaining the reliability and surety of our nation's nuclear weapons. You can't get more responsible than that. And the fact is, Oklahomans need Dennis Baker. Oklahomans want Dennis Baker. We have a need and a want here that it's so important. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Scott because, just like Dennis, I could go on because it's so important for us to get behind Dennis. And then after we're done with the questions, then I'll start back up with explaining how people can help you with your campaign through your Act Blue contributions. So go ahead there, Scott.
Thank you, sir. Dennis, one of the things, and I know that you talk a lot about your background. Certainly, Kevin and I have lifted that up as well. I'm a strong believer in law enforcement, particularly the FBI. Graduated from the FBI Citizens Academy and NYPD Citizens Academy, and so my deep appreciation for law enforcement. But I'm really interested in the way that you're thinking beyond safety and security. Obviously, that prepared you to be your work prepared you to think in much broader terms because the nature of your job as special agent in charge meant that you had to have your eyes all on everything all the time. But one of the things that you were talking about a few minutes ago really, I thought, got to the heart of it. You were talking about the needs here in Oklahoma. And so often what happens is when we elect someone to Congress, that they simply forget or ignore the needs of the people here, the people that put them in office. And I love your approach to working across the aisle, but I'd like for you to talk a little bit about how federal government impacts all of us on a daily basis. Oftentimes we hear, all politics is local. You've got to support local candidates, and certainly we do have to support local and statewide candidates. But I think that there's a very compelling reason looking at Congress, particularly this session, as to why we need someone like you there, and more specifically, how the work of Congress impacts all of us on a daily basis. So I'm saying all of that to say, please look at what's going on in Congress, what you bring to the table that will have a positive impact on the lives of Oklahomans, regardless of where they live in the state.
Yeah, no, thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. Kevin, thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate that. Uh, yeah, so no, I absolutely believe that as Democrats, we should be fighting for every office from the lowest to the highest and fighting day and night and laying the foundation. And this federal office is no different. It is so the federal uh, the Congress, the laws that are being made, the potential laws that are in the works, if the Republicans gain keep a majority, if they regain the Senate, will impact every Oklahoman in ways that they will be surprised. And by that same token, if the Democrats get a majority in the Congress, if they retain the majority in the Senate, if President Biden is reelected, then there's so many positive ways that Oklahomans can be impacted. So when you talked about security, you're right. I think more than just physical security or country security, I think about Americans and Oklahomans' economic security. So economic security is so important. And in America, we have something called a social safety net that we've established because, most Oklahomans, most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. It's unfortunate. I don't think that's right. I think Americans should be able to save money, but they're not able to do that because there's so many obstacles in their way. And they don't really truly have economic security. So if you don't have economic security and you're living paycheck to paycheck, your options are limited. It's not like you have a lot of freedom. So economic security is related to your freedom. It's not like you can pick up and move to another location for a better job. You can't even afford to do that. It's like you're working 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs, and the best you can do every day is, get yourself ready, get your kids out the door, and if you can find affordable daycare, because usually both parents are working, you're going to drop your kids off at daycare. And then if you have time, you're going to try and get them engaged in some activities, extracurricular activities. And then it's bedtime and then you're back at work and you're on this treadmill and there's little time to enjoy your life or to maybe push ahead a little bit where you have some space to maybe buy a bigger home or maybe even afford your first home. So economic security is so important to me. It's so important to Democrats. And so let me tell you one of the main foundations of economic security for Americans that was established, back in the 1930s, and that's Social Security. So Social Security was intended to be a retirement program. So don't let MAGA Republicans tell you that it was never intended to be a retirement system for Americans. It was. And Republicans like to tell you that, well, it's just supposed to supplement other things. No, it was originally intended to be the retirement program because it was nothing. There was nothing for Americans before that. But gradually over the years, the Republicans, they were against it. Let me tell you, Democrats had to fight tooth and nail to get Social Security. It's not like the Republicans gave it any thought. They didn't want it. Republicans passed it. Franklin Roosevelt passed it. And over the years, it's been gradually whittled away. And so when I say economic security, you talk about protecting it. So look up Kevin Hearn, look up his budget, and you can see he wants to raise the age to retirement. And he likes to tell the story that kind of like we have to kill it to save it. We have to kill Social Security to save it because, if we don't do anything, and the thing we have to do is raise. That's not true. That's not true. We don't have to do much of anything except make people pay their fair share in taxes. If you're a wealthy corporation or a wealthy individual, pay your fair share. There is inequities that need to be addressed. And the people that are going to feel the brunt of these inequities are people that depend on Social Security. So same thing with Medicare. And let me tell you who had the first Medicare card, President Harry Truman. So it's Democrats again who worked so hard to get some type of medical insurance for folks. These are social safety nets that Republicans are actively working to undermine and cut. And Oklahomans should be aware of that. And at the federal level, you need someone in Congress that is going to fight that. So let me talk about veterans a little bit. So we often hear Republicans, they love when, you can bet, when Veterans Day comes up in November, social media is going to be flooded with Republicans standing by veterans, doing photo ops. They're so supportive of veterans. But when the money was on the line, Scott, when we had the PACT, the PACT Act, and we wanted to protect veterans that had illnesses from burn pits, they voted no. Kevin Hern voted no to a person, and it was Democrats that passed this health bill to give veterans the medical assistance they needed. And it's personal for me because I have a daughter in the Marine Corps who is assigned in Afghanistan and at Camp Leatherneck. She's a U.S. Marine. And she would, when I would get a chance to speak to her, she would say, she was in logistics, and her job was to, as we were winding down some of our presence there, we were taking a lot of the stuff that we didn't want to turn over to, just leave there. And we had these big burn pits, and we were burning those things, computers, gear, all this stuff, day and night, burn pits. And it was just outside where she was living, breathing that stuff in. So she's fortunate she doesn't have any symptoms now, but that's not to say that 5 years, 10 years down the road, she can develop symptoms. And she served, she deserves that this country honors what she did and give her the medical care. And Kevin, this is important to me. Kevin Hern voted no to that. So it's hypocrisy. So I support veterans. I have children that are in the Marines. I understand what it means to be a parent and to support veterans. So that's another area. So at the federal level, you have the VA, you have protection of veterans, you have Social Security, you have Medicare, you have bills that are being passed now under consideration to make housing more affordable. These are all economic things that are going to move Oklahoma forward. Right now, we have a CHIPS Act that was passed by Democrats. And right here in Tulsa, there's a thing called Tulsa Innovation Labs. And they want a grant from this CHIPS Act, and it's like millions of dollars to help them build an economic hub with technology here, just exactly what should be going on in Tulsa. Well, Kevin Hern voted against that. And he's not doing anything at all to help, Oklahomans understand that money is laying there on the table. So it's upsetting. It's upsetting. We need to change it. We're going to change it. We need forward-thinking leaders, new leadership. Oklahoma needs to move forward. I'm tired of being taken backwards. That's not who we are as Oklahomans.
I'm struck by the number of different groups, marginalized groups that you're talking about here. Veterans, children in school, our seniors. As someone who's approaching retirement age, to think that they could all of a sudden move my retirement age, it's frightening, because there are not a lot of people looking to hire someone in their 60s, especially jobs that have quality health care and so forth as benefits. So what you're talking about seems to me to just be common sense with regard to these issues in these groups. How do you begin to break away from that Republicans versus Democrats? Because what you're describing are Oklahoma values, you're describing American values that cannot be ascribed to simply one party or the other. So how do we begin to convince people that we really have strength if we're willing to work across the aisle, as you've indicated that you're very much willing to do? How do we get that message out to voters for you, voters for other people running for Congress as well? How do we underscore some of the things that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think the first thing one of the things that I do during my campaign, I'm doing during my campaign is making a difference between a MAGA Republican, the MAGA movement, and old school conservative Republicans. So there is a Republican Party in Oklahoma, but it's not really, if you're the average Oklahoman and you registered Republican and you don't have time to pay attention to all this politics. In fact, you probably don't want to because it's just so partisan and it's just irritating. If you're not paying attention, you're just going along thinking, yeah, okay, Republican Party, I've always supported it. But if you look closely, it's not the Republican Party. It's been hijacked. It's been taken over by MAGAs. They are extremists. They're tearing down our fundamental institutions. They're tearing down public schools. They're going to dismantle our post office. They're attacking the FBI. They're attacking government itself so that it can't even function. And they're not offering any solutions. So that's a MAGA movement that I am against. So if you really think about it, in this election, I'm more of a conservative, a true conservative, because I support institutions, American institutions that we should be proud of. I'm more of a conservative, a true conservative than Kevin Hearn. He's a radical. He's a far-right extremist radical. I am more of a conservative. I support law enforcement. I support the FBI. I support the military. I support public education. These are fundamental institutions. I support Congress. I think Congress should be functional. I think it should be functional. We shouldn't be shutting it down. We shouldn't be working to shut it down. Here's another thing that you're going to hear this Democrat talk about a lot, and that's going to be border security. So if you remember, there is a bipartisan border security bill that was worked out between Democrats and Republicans in the Senate. And, James Langford was part of that group, and he had a quick education about partisanship because he worked on that bill. And he said, that's a great bill. And it is a great bill. And it gives money where it's needed. We get more border security folks. We get more immigration judges. We get fentanyl detection machines. We need those. Fentanyl's killing Americans. These are all, don't you think, common sense solutions? We have chaos at the border. Most Americans say we don't want that. We want order at the border. Let's fix it. So we have a bill. It was passed by Democrats in the Senate and in Congress. MAGA Mike Johnson says it's dead on arrival. They won't even hear it. Now think about that. So I'm going to be talking a lot about the border because this is a Democrat that says, yes, we need to have common sense solutions about all these problems, and the border is a problem.
Well, I appreciate that so much because, and I'm glad that you said that you're conservative because I happen to know that about you, but that's something that does not come top to mind for me because you are so common sense focused on when it comes to legislation. Um, and you're absolutely right. The many of the Republicans today are not conservative. They are just extreme. So it's refreshing to hear a Democrat talking about conservative, their interpretation of conservative, and how that can really work for our country. Um, I describe myself as ultra liberal, but there are areas where I do tend to think more conservatively. So I appreciate what you're saying there. Like again, though, let's get to the Hearn voter. How how are you going to help push those people to say, you know what, this guy is right. Kevin Hearn has done nothing to help Oklahoma. How can you reach those voters?
Yeah, we're doing it in several in several stages. And right now our campaign is looking to re-energize the Democratic base in Oklahoma, to re-energize it, to get Democrats re-engaged at now. I mean, not, we can't wait till October to start looking at who's on the ballot and what are they standing for. So I need Democrats to be engaged. We have to. We can't rest on our laurels because we have no laurels to rest on. Republicans can afford to do it. So Kevin Herring can afford to let Fox News be his microphone. He can let that, his small minority MAGA base, be the ones amplifying everything so that people think that that's how Oklahomans, the majority of Oklahomans, think. And if we don't counter it, you know, the loudest voice in the room. I mean, I was always told, you know, any meeting, the loudest voice in the room prevails. And you have other people sitting there thinking their thoughts, not agreeing, but not saying anything. That's not effective. That doesn't work. We have the loudest voice in the room, MAGA Republicans shouting at the top of their lungs and everyone else sitting on the sideline. And we have to get Democrats leading the charge so that other people will follow and see that these are people just like anyone else. They believe in the Constitution. And the biggest difference is they don't think Americans should be pitted against each other and that all Americans deserve equal protection. They all deserve it. And that's not ultra liberal, that's American. And that women should be able to make their own healthcare decisions about when and where to start a family. And that's not radical. That's as American as you can get, because that's a law that's been in place for over 50 years and a right that's been taken away. So protecting our rights is not radical. It's, well, actually, if you think about it, Scott, we're trying to conserve a right we had that's been taken away. Roe v. Wade, it was taken away. And there's more rights that they can't wait to take away under the guise of freedom. So, so to your question, Democrats, you need to be engaged. You don't like it is, you're a Democrat, stand up, be heard. And then you'll start a movement. And so once we get our message out, I know that the majority of Oklahomans in this state do not believe in far right extremism, and they're tired of the partisanship. They're tired of the fighting. At some point, they want to see what government, what elected officials can do for them, for this country, and for their families to move us forward into a new era. And we're not going to move forward. And I say this repeatedly, and I'm going to say it during the entire campaign. We're not going to move forward in Oklahoma until MAGA is defeated. And Republicans, you need to get busy, and you need to help us defeat MAGA. And then you need to elect, if you truly believe in conservative values, then elect true conservatives that can work with Democrats and make this country better. And let's have a majority here that can incrementally improve this country year after year to get where we need to be and stop the extremism.
Before I turn this back to Kevin, I just want to underscore something that you said, and I smiled as you said it because I thought it was so appropriate. Protecting American values is not extremist ideology. And I think that's brilliant, succinct, and if that message alone penetrates, then you're ahead of the game. So I from the very first time we met, I was impressed with you, and you just keep doing the right things, saying the right things. And I have so enjoyed this visit this morning, and can't wait to get together and see you again in person soon. So thank you for your candor, and just know we are behind you, sir.
Yeah, Scott, thank you so much. Kevin, enjoy the conversation. It's always good to sit down, and a lot of stuff that we're talking about, really, it's just common sense solutions. It's nothing It's nothing radical. I mean, maybe what's radical is that we want to have a Congress that works. I don't think that's radical. I want my
I don't either.
I want my schools to work. I am tired of a broken America. We're going to fix these issues, and I'm tired of people working their best to break it. And those people shouldn't be in Congress, and we're working day and night to make sure they're not. And we're working hard to raise the money to get our message out.
Well, thanks so much for being on Coffee with Democrats. But before we go, we've got some really important stuff that people need to understand how they can come on board and help Dennis Baker become the next congressman representing the state of Oklahoma for Congressional District number 1 in Oklahoma. The first way we can do that, I'm going to share screen here. I want people to be able to know how to get onto Dennis's website. So we're going to share your website on the screen with us right now. And this is the changes coming for Dennis Baker for U.S. Congress. And this is the donate screen. This is the screen that is so important for people to be able to go to and be able to see this. So when you go to the website, it's the secureactblue.com account for Dennis Baker. And it should have all the information there. Your donor information, just fill it out with your email address, your name, your first name, last name, your street address, your zip code, all that information. And then that makes it very easy down here. And, $5. If $10 is too much, let's start with $5. You can go to another dollar amount down here and put in the dollar amount that you want, because it's so important. Give a cup of coffee. Just give the amount that you would for a cup of coffee to Dennis, and that's going to help him be able to add or to be able to buy advertising that we've got to get his word out with. So again, whatever you can donate what you can. Please go to that website. Also, if you want to know what the issues are, I've got it pulled up here. The issues are broad and wide. Number one, we see the radicalization that's going on within Oklahoma, and we have, like the Moms for Liberty. Scott and I, we tease about that all day long, about the people who champion that. It's a radical organization. In my mind, it should be labeled as a terrorist organization. But you also see the issues for what Kevin Hearn has done, taking money, $2.6 million in PPP funding, and had that money completely forgiven. And yet he wants welfare for me, but not for thee, and welfare for the wealthy. And when we really need to have distribution of access, not distribution of funds, but distribution of access, to be able to better our lives. And we got to do that through the Democratic Party by building jobs, by creating high-speed rail between Tulsa and Oklahoma City. It's time to do that. It's way past time to do that. We also need to talk about Dennis Baker himself versus Kevin Hearn and what the issues are. And Dennis, on his website, your people are absolute champions in my mind, because you've gone one for one. Who is Dennis Baker compared to who is Kevin Hearn? And you can just see the picture right there with Kevin Hearn around the clowns, because he surrounds himself with a clown show every single day. And it's this guy has made himself into a multi-billionaire or multi-millionaire off the backs of working people. Again, he doesn't even believe in giving people a living wage. And yet he wants them to come to work for him. And at some point, if he was ever given the opportunity, he would make them pay him in order to work for him. That's how radical and ignorant he is. So those policies that he's put in place, we've got to put a real champion in place that can support the people of Oklahoma, and not the corporations that want to do nothing more than bleed out the people of Oklahoma. So thank you, Dennis, for being on Coffee with Democrats. you're a great friend. We support you 100%. We're going to do everything within our power. And we want people to be able to come to your website and help you in whatever way, in whatever capacity they can as well. So thanks for coming with us. And man, I tell you what, this is such a strong conversation. I've enjoyed it so much. I'm ready to go out. Show me the wall that I need to run through for you. Okay.
Yeah, no, this has been great. This is the type of energy that we're wanting to generate because it's our future. It's our future. And we need engaged people every day looking at these issues. And once they see the truth and once they see the way, then Oklahoma values are going to prevail.
I'm going to say it. I'm just going to say it one more time. People, let's get behind Dennis Baker. His the website to get behind him is so easy. Just go to secure.actblue.com/donate/Dennis-Baker-4-Congress-1. It stands for Dennis Baker for Congress, Congressional District 1. Let's get out there. Let's do everything we can to support him. If it's money that we can provide, let's provide the money. If it's volunteer and you live in the Tulsa, in CD1, let's get out and volunteer our time. Let's do everything we can. Be a driver to help the people that are going to go door to door. It's amazing. We find out that there is more people who will come to the polls and vote for Dennis Baker when we knock on their door and ask them, please, would you come and vote? And we need to get more people to do that. So please volunteer your time to help Dennis Baker, and get a list of people that are in that district as well. I mean, yesterday we had Sarah Gray. And she's running for on the north side and west side of Tulsa for Tulsa County Commissioner number 2. Well, if you want to support her and you want to support Dennis, you can combine your efforts and when you're door knocking to help both. And we need that all over Oklahoma. We need people to be able to combine their efforts and work together and get things accomplished because we're not going to do that by just sitting around. We've got to be able to convince people at their doorstep that they need to drop that single vote check mark and vote for the person, not for the party. That's got to be our mantra from now until November. Vote for the person, not for the party. The party is failing Oklahoma. That party has continued to fail and has failed for over 13 years. We've got to break that down. We've got to break it apart. And the best way to do that is a vote a Democrat into office. I'm going to give you a couple of last words. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to get fired up here, Dennis.
No, I love it. I love it. Well, this is exactly what we need, and these types of forums and getting a chance to sit down and just talk through some of these issues. Great questions. So thank you guys so much, and really enjoyed it.
Well, we
get out there and knock some doors, my friend.
We've really enjoyed having you on with us.
Hey, if you guys, if I happen to call you, hey, I just call to say hello because I'm going to call as many people as I can because that's part of it. So I'll be spending my day making phone calls.
Well, we'll answer the call. We'll answer the call, and we'll also answer the call to duty. So thanks so much for being with us on Coffee with Democrats, Dennis. It's great to talk to you. I can't wait for the next time for us to be able to have this another conversation.
All right, thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.